can't mimic voices for love or money. I'm completely hopeless at it.
My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities.
It started with whispers. Then came the revelation that shattered royal tradition. No one expected it to come from Prince Harry, not like this, not with such force. When his memoir, Spare, hit the shelves, the world braced itself for drama. But what? They read surpassed every prediction. Camilla, Queen Consort, was no longer just a controversial figure married into the crown. She was now the center of a storm so volatile, it left the monarchy scrambling. In the pages of Spare, Harry didn't just write about pain or loss, he named names. And at the heart of it all was Camilla portrayed not as a misunderstood royal, but as a calculated presence, weaving herself into the royal web at others' expense. The palace, known for silence in the face of scandal, didn't issue a statement, but insiders began whispering. Something had changed. Behind those palace walls, meetings were happening tight-lipped, urgent, and tense. Discussions of how to manage the fallout turned into darker conversations. Should Camilla be distanced from the spotlight? Was it time to quietly remove her from the royal front line? The press sensed it. The headlines morphed from coverage of Harry's memoir to deep speculation about Camilla's future. Social media erupted. Royal watchers, long divided on Camilla's place in history, now questioned if her time as Queen Consort had come to an unceremonious halt. Online forums picked apart every detail of her recent absences. Why wasn't she at Prince George's school event? Why had she canceled a charity gala appearance with no explanation? Each missing moment added fuel to the theory that the monarchy was staging a silent exit. They weren't going to announce anything, but the signs were clear. And then the word surfaced. Ban. A term never before associated with a queen consort. It wasn't official, but it didn't need to be. The palace didn't confirm it, but they didn't deny it either. Insiders whispered of private instructions, staff members changed schedules, and Camilla's public calendar grew mysteriously thin. The whispers had turned into a reality the public could no longer ignore. But this wasn't just about optics or public relations. It was personal. For Charles, this was the woman he had loved for decades, the one he had fought to legitimize in the eyes of both the crown and the people. For Camilla, it was the collapse of a reputation she had spent years trying to rehabilitate. And for Harry, it was a reckoning long overdue. But Harry's public remarks were just the beginning. What followed would shake the very foundation of the monarchy. One word. That's all it took to change how the world saw Queen Camilla. In a moment that would send shockwaves through the monarchy, Prince Harry uttered a phrase that reignited decades of pain, betrayal, and buried resentment. He called her the villain, and with that, the carefully crafted image of Queen Camilla, a reformed consort, accepted by the crown and begrudgingly embraced by the public, began to collapse under the weight of a single accusation. It wasn't just name-calling. It was a direct reference to the pain that shaped Harry's childhood. A word drenched in the grief of a son who watched his mother suffer under the shadow of another woman. To many, the past was a wound that had started to heal. Over the years, Camilla had been slowly repositioned from controversial mistress to loyal wife, from outsider to official consort. But for Harry, the wound had never closed. And now, with the world watching, he tore off the bandage. In interviews following the release of Spare, Harry didn't mince words. He accused Camilla of being the third person in his parents' marriage, a phrase that mirrored Princess Diana's haunting confession decades earlier. It wasn't just painful, it was calculated. A message that the past wasn't forgotten and, more importantly, not forgiven. The impact was immediate. Media outlets picked apart every syllable. Was this just Harry venting, or was there a deeper truth behind the label? Royal commentators speculated that calling Camilla a villain wasn't just a personal attack. It was a strategic move to shake the foundations of the monarchy's inner circle. Public trust, already fragile, began to crack. Online forums flooded, with old footage, old interviews, and old theories. The narrative shifted from reconciliation to confrontation. Camilla was no longer the woman who had gracefully assumed her role. She was now back in the spotlight as the symbol of betrayal and manipulation. Inside the palace, the fallout was even more intense. Charles, who had spent decades legitimizing his relationship with Camilla, reportedly felt gutted. He had gone to great lengths to rehabilitate her image, not just in the eyes of the public, but within the royal family itself. Harry's words undid years of effort in a single blow. Sources claimed that Charles felt blindsided not just by the memoir, but by the venom behind Harry's public remarks. This wasn't just a family feud, it was a reputational war. For Camilla, the emotional toll was undeniable. Once confident and composed during royal engagements, she now appeared uneasy, guarded. Her public demeanor shifted. The warmth in her eyes was replaced with tension. Every camera, every reporter's question, every whispered comment in the crowd became a reminder that she was once again on trial, not just in the court of public opinion, but in the heart of the very institution she thought had finally embraced her. But the worst was yet to come, because what Harry left out of the memoir was even more explosive. There's a chapter in Spare that never saw the light of day, until now. Buried deep within the early drafts of Prince Harry's explosive memoir was a section so volatile, so damning, that even his most trusted advisors urged him to leave it out. Not because it lacked truth, but because it could tear the royal family apart. That chapter, according to insiders, laid bare a side of Queen Camilla the world wasn't meant to see. A side that, if revealed, would destroy what little peace remained inside Buckingham Palace. It wasn't just about past affairs or old grudges. It was about manipulation, media control, and betrayal on a scale that redefined royal gamesmanship. Harry, known for breaking the royal silence, allegedly wrote that Camilla had orchestrated a campaign to clean her public image, and she did it at someone else's expense, Meghan Markle. According to multiple sources familiar with the unpublished material, Harry believed Camilla's team deliberately fed stories to the press. These weren't small leaks. They were bombs, carefully planted narratives that painted Meghan as erratic, entitled, and divisive. And the timing? It was almost too perfect. Every time Camilla's own controversies threatened to gain traction, a new scandal about Meghan would flood the front pages. Coincidence? Or a calculated deflection by someone who knew how to survive in the spotlight? This wasn't just a theory. The manuscript reportedly included dates, headlines, and patterns, each thread leading back to the same conclusion: that while the palace claimed unity, there were factions behind closed doors, and Camilla's was among the most powerful. For years, the public had watched Meghan endure relentless attacks, often with no clear source. But Harry allegedly connected the dots, revealing that while Meghan took the hits, Camilla emerged unscathed. Behind every glowing article about the Queen Consort's duty and dignity, there were whispers that she had exchanged silence for survival, loyalty for leverage. The most chilling part? The palace knew. According to those who've seen the suppressed material, high-ranking aides had raised concerns. But any move to expose the game risked destabilizing the monarchy itself. Camilla was no longer a mistress, she was the wife of the king. To implicate her in media warfare wasn't just scandalous, it was dangerous. And so, the chapter was removed. Quietly. Permanently. Or so they thought. But the truth, once written, never truly disappears. Those who have read the lost chapter say it was more than just a critique, it was a confession. A cry of frustration from a prince who watched his wife suffer while others advanced unchecked. The palace feared the chapter's impact not because it was speculative, but because it was specific. Too specific. And if it were ever leaked or published, it would no longer be Camilla's word against Harry's, it would be evidence. Cold, calculated, devastating. But even more damning than hidden words was what Harry allegedly recorded in secret. Hidden. For years, the secret recording finally surfaced, and the palace couldn't deny it anymore. What began as whispered rumors within royal circles soon turned into a full-blown crisis. Behind closed doors, Prince Harry had kept something no one else expected: a private recording. It was captured during a quiet gathering at Clarence House, a place where trust was supposed to reign, not betrayal. In that room, away from flashing cameras and scripted interviews, Queen Camilla allegedly said things that changed everything. Words not meant for public ears. Words that revealed how she truly felt not just about Meghan, but shockingly, about Queen Elizabeth herself. According to insiders, the recording captured Camilla referring to Meghan as that American troublemaker. The phrase alone was incendiary. But what followed was even more alarming. She reportedly suggested that the late Queen was too frail to make sound judgments, implying that many of Her Majesty's decisions had been manipulated or misguided in her final years. For Harry, who had spent years defending Meghan from relentless attacks and deeply mourning the loss of his grandmother, this was the final confirmation he needed. It was proof that his suspicions weren't just paranoia. They were rooted in something real, something cruel, and something he could no longer ignore. He didn't go public. Not yet. Instead, he took the recording straight to the people who mattered most. In a private meeting, he played it for his father, King Charles, and his aunt, Princess Anne. The moment the audio finished, the room fell into stunned silence. There were no justifications, no deflections, just the heavy, undeniable weight of Camilla's voice echoing from a device none of them had expected. Charles, a man torn between the loyalty he owed his son and the love he had spent years defending, reportedly looked shattered. Princess Anne, always the stoic figure in public, was said to be livid. But Camilla wasn't ready to surrender. When confronted, she dismissed the remarks as offhand, taken out of context, spoken in jest. She insisted the words were never meant to cause harm. But it was too late. The damage was done not only to her own credibility, but to the fragile peace that barely held the family together. The recording didn't just expose private opinions, it exposed the division that had festered beneath years of rehearsed unity. What was once a controlled narrative was now spiraling out of the royal family's grasp. This wasn't just about a soundbite, it was about trust. And once trust was broken, no crown could mend it. Camilla's allies within the palace began to shrink. Her confidence waned, and the tension at royal events became almost unbearable. Eyes followed her, not with admiration, but with suspicion. Every step, every glance, every pause scrutinized. The fallout was swift, and the consequences were growing louder with each passing day. The confrontation was inevitable, but no one expected what Camilla would say to seal her fate. In the halls of Windsor, words were exchanged that could never be taken back. It was the moment everything had been building toward. After weeks of silence, simmering tensions, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the confrontation no one wanted, but everyone expected, finally happened. A private meeting, sealed from the public eye, yet seismic in its consequences. Inside that room stood Prince Harry, no longer the quiet son in exile, but a man carrying truths too heavy to ignore. King Charles, torn between the throne and the family, tearing apart beneath it, and Queen Camilla, caught in the center of a storm she could no longer dismiss. Harry didn't arrive to negotiate. He came with evidence, a recording that could not be denied. And when it played, the air in the room changed. Camilla, once poised and composed, reportedly lashed out not in regret, but in fury. She denied the intent behind her words, called the tape an ambush, and accused Harry of trying to sabotage everything she had worked for. Her voice, usually measured, cracked under the pressure, as she painted herself as the victim of a calculated attack. She claimed Harry was blinded by bitterness, obsessed with revenge, and willing to destroy his own family to make a point. But Harry didn't flinch. With eyes locked on the father he had once idolized, he stood firm. "This is the truth," he said, reportedly with a tone so calm it only intensified the discomfort in the room. He wasn't just airing grievances, he was lifting the veil. The years of manipulation, the games played behind palace gates, the emotional cost of staying silent, it all came pouring out. This wasn't rebellion, it was a reckoning, one that Charles could no longer pretend wasn't happening. Then came the line that cracked whatever fragile peace remained. In what insiders describe as a moment of pure, unrehearsed venom, Camilla snapped. "Your mother is not coming back," she allegedly said, her voice cold, final. And just like that, time froze. The air turned heavy with grief and rage. That single sentence meant, as a dismissal, landed like a dagger in Harry's chest. But it didn't just hurt him. It exposed a truth Charles could no longer ignore. The woman he had defended was now crossing lines that couldn't be undone. In that moment, the decision was made not through declarations, but through silence. Charles, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, reportedly made a mental calculation. Camilla's role had to be restructured, not out of punishment, but out of necessity. Her presence, once essential, had become a liability. The crown could withstand scandal, but it could not survive self-destruction. The monarchy needed to protect its future, and that meant rethinking who would stand beside the king. But Charles couldn't make this decision public. So, the palace quietly launched a new strategy. No announcements, no press releases, just a quiet disappearance. One day, she was there front and center at royal engagements, hand in hand with the king, name etched into every press briefing. And then, without warning, Queen Camilla began to fade from view. It started subtly, almost, too subtly to notice. A missed appearance here, an absence there. But it was her failure to attend Prince George's private birthday celebration that made even the most loyal royal watchers raise their eyebrows. This was no ordinary oversight. As Queen Consort, Camilla's presence at such a family milestone wasn't just expected, it was protocol. Yet she was nowhere to be seen. The palace response? Cold and calculated. Prior commitments, they said. Minor health concerns, murmured another aide. But no details followed. No timeline, no clarity. Just a void where Camilla had once stood. Her face vanished from schedules, her name erased from official summaries, her public duties quietly reassigned or delayed. In a family built on image, this kind of silence spoke volumes. And the public, far from being pacified, erupted into speculation. Was Camilla ill? Was this punishment? Or was the palace, without saying a single word, writing her out of the picture? Behind the scenes, sources whispered of a shift in tone. Where Camilla's schedule had once been guarded with priority, it now sat empty. Events she once co-hosted were suddenly headed by Princess Anne or Catherine. Her press team, once active and precise, fell strangely quiet. Some insiders claimed she had retreated voluntarily. Others weren't so sure. They spoke of quiet meetings, rewritten talking points, and new orders from the very top. Limit visibility, reduce engagement, control the narrative. To the public, Camilla's vanishing act was puzzling. But to those within the palace, it was unmistakable. A silent removal had begun. Even royal photographers, usually tipped off for major engagements, found themselves left in the dark. It wasn't just the cancellations, it was the pattern. Camilla had become a ghost within her own reign. Once touted as the cornerstone of Charles's stability, she was now being boxed out from the very institution she had fought so hard to be part of. Not with rage, not with scandal, but with surgical precision. The monarchy had chosen silence over scandal, distance over defense. And that silence echoed louder than any official statement could. Online, royal watchers began to connect the dots. Threads appeared across social platforms, comparing her recent retreat to previous scandals. In the House of Windsor, only this time, there was no exile, no abdication, no televised crisis. Just absence, quiet, calculated, and complete. For the first time, the public began to wonder if Camilla had already lost her place, and if this so-called absence was the monarchy's way of rewriting her role without ever admitting it had changed. But this wasn't just about one event. Symbolic shifts inside the palace told a bigger story. When your seat at the royal table disappears, it means more than just a change in plans. It means you're no longer part of the strategy. You've become the strategy. At the annual Remembrance Sunday service, one of the most symbolic events in the royal calendar, Queen Camilla's placement raised more than just eyebrows. While the senior royals stood together in a unified display of tradition and honor, Camilla was positioned noticeably apart. Not absent, present, but peripheral. In royal language, such choices are never accidental. Seating is power. Visibility is relevance. And in that moment, Camilla's shifting status was impossible to ignore. Behind palace doors, the transformation continued. Rooms once associated with Camilla were undergoing quiet changes. Furniture was rearranged. Paintings were moved. Her favorite sitting room, a space once filled with her personal touches, had reportedly been redecorated in a more neutral style. Even her framed photographs began to disappear from the more public areas of royal residences. No statement was issued, no explanation offered, but those who worked within the palace walls understood. This wasn't just a renovation. It was erasure by design. The whispers grew louder. Senior staff, once aligned with Camilla's inner circle, began shifting their loyalties. Not outwardly, not yet. But their movements were telling. Fewer briefings, fewer engagements, fewer mentions. Camilla, once a constant presence at the king's side, was now drifting into the background. In her place, a new energy began to take shape: Prince William and Princess Catherine. Young, polished, steady. They didn't push Camilla out. They didn't need to. The tide had already turned. And they, consciously or not, were the ones the monarchy had begun to gravitate toward. King Charles said nothing. He didn't defend Camilla. He didn't condemn her either. But silence can speak louder than 1,000 proclamations. Those closest to the king described him as distant, reflective, troubled. He had spent decades legitimizing his love for Camilla, reshaping the monarchy to fit her in. But now, with his son challenging that legacy and the public watching closely, he seemed unwilling to intervene. Whether it was fatigue or calculation, his decision not to act became a decision in itself. Everything was changing, but quietly. No dramatic exits, no banishments, just a series of subtle moves that told a very clear story. Camilla's power wasn't being stripped, it was being relocated. Her influence, once woven into every corner of palace operations, was now confined to smaller, more private roles. She hadn't been pushed out with scandal. She was being dimmed, gently, methodically. The institution was preserving its image, reshaping its future, and repositioning its figures of focus. And Camilla, once central to the crown's redemption arc, was now being treated like a remnant of the past. But now, all eyes turned to one question. Is this exile temporary, or the end of Queen Camilla's reign? The palace remains silent, but silence speaks louder than ever before. In a monarchy that thrives on symbols, Camilla's fading presence has become its loudest one. Once embraced by King Charles as a stabilizing force, a companion not just in love but in rule, she now walks the tightrope between royalty and irrelevance. Officially, she still holds the title of Queen Consort, but titles mean little when the influence that once came with them begins to vanish. And the signs are everywhere. Her name, once routinely echoed in royal communications, is rarely mentioned. Her speeches, once carefully crafted to solidify her public image, have slowed to a whisper, and her public appearances, once regular and strategic, have grown noticeably scarce. The British public remains split down the middle. For some, Camilla is a woman who weathered public scorn and won the heart of a king. To others, she is still the shadow behind Diana's tragedy, a symbol of a broken fairy tale. And now, with Harry's revelations tearing open wounds long thought to be buried, that division has only deepened. For her defenders, this is a witch hunt. For her critics, it's justice long overdue. Whichever side the public leans toward, one thing is certain. Camilla's future no longer rests on tradition. It now depends on perception. Royal experts, quietly and without fanfare, are calling it a shift. The monarchy is repositioning itself not around Charles and Camilla, but around the next generation. William and Catherine, polished and uncontroversial, are being shaped as the faces of a modern crown. Their influence grows as Camilla's wanes. Their appearances multiply as hers fade. And the message, though unspoken, is crystal clear. The future belongs to them. The royal family, once focused on healing old wounds, is now chasing relevance in a rapidly changing world. And Camilla doesn't fit into that equation the way she once did. Even inside the palace, her circle has tightened. Advisors speak cautiously. Staff members are reassigned. The quiet exclusion continues not through cruelty, but calculation. She's not exiled. She's not disgraced. But she is being redefined. Once a necessary figure in Charles's path to the throne, Camilla now seems like a relic, of a chapter the monarchy is trying to close. Her power was built on image rehabilitation, but that image has cracked perhaps beyond repair. And in the shadows of that collapse looms the legacy of Princess Diana. Diana never wore the crown. She didn't need to. Her influence was woven into the identity of modern royalty. Harry's words and the public's response have reminded the world that Diana never truly left. Her story lives on in the sons she raised, the people she touched, and the glaring contrast she now represents against Camilla's uncertain reign. The monarchy may never be the same again. But one thing is clear: Camilla's fate now lies in the shadows she once tried to escape. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.